We are live. How's everyone doing? Welcome to another episode of It All Depends podcast, the show where we share tactical and actionable insights for customer success manager. I'm your host, Prash, and I'm super happy to be here on a Friday. So my guest today is so versatile. She's been a teacher, climbed a 10,000 feet mountain in Colorado, loves music, loves basketball, and is obviously a great and upcoming customer success manager. I'm sure you have seen her on LinkedIn and on the multiple podcasts she's been a guest on. Julie, thanks so much for being here on the show. It's so good to have you. How are you?
That was an epic introduction. Thank you. Thank you for that. That was awesome. I'm good. I'm excited to be on the podcast that I think has the best name ever. So this is great. I'm excited. Let's do it.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks so much for being here. I was just before we started hit record, we were just talking about how I was coming from an escalation that is never fun. So I'm sure we're gonna get into that escalation bit and piece about how we deal with that. Before we start that, as the podcast says, it all depends. So we're gonna set up the foundation, set up the stage. So Julie would love to kind of know about the company you work for, Julie, and a brief introduction of the company and the industry.
Yeah. So Dooley is a sales productivity tool. It allows AEs to capture all the information that they need on calls and also be able to collaborate on deals and reduce that annoyance of updating Salesforce. So that is what
Ah,
Dooley does, and we are in the SaaS space. We are in the sales and enablement space. Yeah,
interesting. And how long have you been in the company for now?
1.5 years, 1.5 years. Yeah,
Nice,
it's been
nice.
it's been quite some time. It's pretty crazy. I feel like time just kind of flies sometimes in customer success. You know how that
It
goes.
does,
So
it does, totally, totally. And how is this setup like for customer success? As a CSM, are you involved in onboarding, contracts, renewals? Like, how does that work?
yeah. So our team is small. We have
Yeah.
one customer support specialist. She manages like our support team. And then obviously like I contribute to that sometimes depending on like, if she's out or whatever, if they need all hands on. But then also have me as a CSM, and then I have a manager, and the manager also manages some accounts as well. So it's the three of us. I do onboarding, so new business. I do implementation. Um, and then I also do the renewals as well. So I manage like everything for my accounts.
Yeah, cool, cool. So
Yeah.
it is a very much like a startup kind of
Yeah.
setup where
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
are involved. Yeah, okay, cool, cool. And you mentioned you're a team of three, right?
Mhm, mhm.
Yes. Okay, so like how many customers are you handling at the moment?
Yeah. Around like 50, I would say. Um, I think that definitely it's a lot to do like new business plus renewals, like that can get tricky to manage. But I do think that since it's my first role, it's really good for me to get that experience of like everything. So it just gives me a lot of perspective and is definitely going to help me like in my career. So, um, yeah, been a good experience.
Yeah, and I would like to like highlight that 50 might sound for for some like a small number, but when you're doing onboarding, implementation, contract renewal, everything, that's a lot of work that you need to put in and also liaising internally with your stakeholders. So definitely, and also I'm glad that you mentioned that it's a good place to be where you can learn so much on the different roles that's onboarding and contract renewal. And when you
Mhm.
move to that role as a CSM where you're only uh, uh, you know, discussing strategies and best practices, you would have a good
Yeah.
understanding of how you're working together with internally with the stakeholders. So
Yeah.
there's good alignment like cross-functionally. It's a really
Mhm.
good place to be. And like, how does the on the contracts piece, like,
Mhm.
what do you think like is the average contract duration for your customers?
I would say like a year.
A year? Yeah,
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 usually
same.
sign for like a year. Yeah.
Yeah, even for us, like I think I met someone. I'm forgetting which product was that, but then it was like 6 months or something. And
Oh,
then I was
that's
like, oh
tricky.
gosh,
That's
yeah, it is, right? And then I also had a customer whom I was trying to save, and then I don't know how this happened, but then they signed up a 1 month contract. So every month I was like always stressing out, are they
yeah.
gonna
Oh
renew?
man.
Are they
Yeah.
gonna renew? So that was a stressful one. So 1 year, 1 year is just nice. Even at HubSpot, they do that. So that's great. With regards to
Curious for
the,
you. Curious for you,
yeah,
quick. What do you all do at HubSpot? Are you doing like onboarding and renewals and everything too?
no. So we have a separate onboarding team, uh, and we have a separate contract manager
Oh,
team.
okay.
So I work closely with them, which is great. It
Yeah,
wasn't
that's
as
nice.
such when we were smaller in size, but when we grew bigger, this was implemented. So we can focus on the strategy and the value piece rather than the admin. But the admin somehow always comes on your plate somehow. Anyway.
That's awesome. That's
Uh,
really cool. You can focus and be like super strategic then.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah, that's
exactly.
great. That's great.
Uh, on the market segment, Julie, so do you have like a specific market segment that you're looking at? The 50 customers that you're managing?
Um, it's kind of like you mean like what customers we service specifically? Like
Yeah,
what industry they're in?
or even the market, like are all based in the States or are they spread
Oh,
out
yeah, yeah.
globally?
Um, I have like customers in the US, customers in the UK, also have a customer in Israel. Yeah, I kind of have all over. So,
Oh, and
yeah.
how do you manage those, the
Yeah,
time zone,
it's fun.
the time difference? Wow.
Um, yeah, so UK for me is like a lot of my mornings, and then yeah, Israel's also like in the morning as well. And then other than that, I feel like that's a lot of my mornings, but I feel like I can balance it decent with the rest of my customer base. Like they're either be like Eastern or Central time in the US. So I feel like a lot of my meetings get in the morning, which I kind of prefer because I feel like that's probably when I'm more alert and like, have energy versus the end of the day. So um yeah, it's pretty manageable right now. Depending on like if there's a ton of UK meetings, that can get a lot, but otherwise than that, it's cool to see all the different, yeah, meet all these people from different countries, see the businesses from different countries. So yeah,
Yeah, totally. And talking about meetings, so what does the call cadence look like for those 50 customers for you?
yeah. So for really larger customers or like higher AR, like I'll want to be on like a quarterly cadence for sure. If even higher needs with lots of different teams on dually, monthly as well in there. Other than that, try to have like a quarterly cadence, but maybe sometimes it's just an onboarding call after, and then maybe it's like later on a call in the journey. If it's a smaller account and we may not need all those touch points, and it may just be like more of async communication. So
Yeah, I'm trying to imagine because even like when we're talking about call cadence, it can't even be like a standard call cadence, considering that you have different roles to play when it's like onboarding,
yeah,
contract, and then everything in between. So it's just kind of tricky, and then you most likely adapt it from what I hear is according to their needs and according
yeah,
to the
needs.
stage that they're at. Okay, cool,
Yeah, for sure.
cool.
What about you? I'm curious. Like how do you, because you have a lot of customers.
So
How do you
I
manage that?
today, yeah, so today I checked. I have 131 to be exact. So how it works on our side is, uh, so I'm managing UK and Ireland customers.
Okay.
So our call cadence is bi-monthly. And now we are kind of focusing on something called optimal engagement cadence, where we're making sure that we are engaging with the customer over a call, not just email,
Oh, nice.
as a leading indicator. So at least 15 calls in a week. So that comes to around three calls in a
Mm,
day.
mm.
Not always. I tend to like keep my Monday mornings and Fridays
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
free, but generally it comes about that. So almost like hitting half of your customers every month.
Okay.
If you look at that, so that's how we are kind of assessed on at the moment. Yeah,
Nice. That's awesome. Cool. Yeah, I feel like three
cool.
meetings a day is like probably like the sweet spot. If you get to five, depending on the meeting type, like that could get like Anything above 5 is a lot, I would say.
Yeah, totally. I get exhausted at the end of it, and I'm more on the introverted side.
Same, same.
So I'm like, oh, after I hit 5, I'm like, okay, I'm just like gonna go watch Netflix and do something just by myself kind of thing. So yeah,
Yep, I
totally.
agree. I'm with you.
Awesome. So now that we set the stage, that gives a really good context on like how you approach your day to day and what are the
Mhm.
tactics and what are the skills that actually make sense that directly result in a performance. And about that, like as we mentioned earlier, like you have so many things, you have so many different roles that you need to attend to as a CSM at Julie. So how do you prioritize? Like what is your 20% input that results in the 80% output?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I feel like I'm constantly trying to like get better at this. I feel like that's prioritization in the CSM role is like so important because I think if you don't set boundaries on your calendar or what you need to focus on, you're just going to get pulled in like 17 million directions. But I would say I really pride myself on prep for calls. So, um, like a week in advance for calls, making sure that I have my notes. What type of call is this? Who am I communicating with? Um, and really just making sure that I'm setting myself up for success. Like obviously it's not going to go exactly how I think it's going to go, but I think prep can reduce the amount of like bad calls for sure, or just like calls going kind of awry. So I really pride myself on that. I also think clear action items and next steps is something that I really focus on as well, like within specific calls. Um, and then the other thing I also focus on is like my communication with customers. And one of the specific things I was thinking about recently that I wanted to touch on here is like email communication. There's so much emailing that we do and so much follow-ups that and I just think about this a lot too because of like content on LinkedIn, but how you format emails and how you share information is so important. And if it's not easily digestible, like at a glance, people are not reading it. Like they get so many emails in a day. Think about that. They get so many Slack messages. So I just think I'm always thinking about how can I present information? How are they actually going to digest this information? And I think that's really, really important in our role because we do so much communication.
That's such a great point on the email. And I also remember on LinkedIn you recently, I think today you commented and it popped up in my feed
Mhm.
as well. It was something I can't recall, but something related to that. And you mentioned that, oh, this actually applies to the email. Do you,
I think I
do you
remember,
recall
but
that?
I forget what it was specifically. But I think
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
something I mentioned just
Yeah,
recently on LinkedIn.
totally. Yeah, even like me, like as me as not as a not thinking as a CSM, but just an individual. Like I get so many emails, and like most of the emails I do is ignore. So it's really key on even the email subject that you put in and
Yes,
what's
yes.
in yeah and what's in the body and how you frame it. I've always gone with the approach like uh write as if you're talking
Hmm.
approach
Hmm.
and not using like unnecessary jargons and
Yeah,
lingos that no one
and
uses.
keep the language so basic too. Also, like I try to format things in bullets a lot too. So like,
Hmm.
first line is whatever we talked about, like overview, and then I'm like, okay, this is the action items we talked about. Here's what I need to share with you, resources, and then kind of end it. That's kind of how a lot of my follow-ups I feel like are formatted. So yeah, I think that's always something I'm going to be revising and thinking about, but I think it's so important in our role because we just have so many email follow-ups plus just saving our time with the follow-up. So
Yeah, I want to go back to the prepping uh, for a call.
hmm.
Uh,
Hmm.
I remember you mentioned that you plan that and prep for it a week in advance. Like, could you kind of elaborate on how you like approach that prep? Like, what are the things that you look for? And what's your like approach basically?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I mean, I guess 1 week is like probably the farthest I would do it. It depends on what the call is, obviously. So if I'm doing like a business review or a quarterly review, like where there's lots of important key stakeholders, like I may be prepping for that like far, far in advance because, there's lots of things I got to gather from product or whatnot. And I may be pulling in leadership into those calls. But for like, I would say like not as important call as that or as much prep. I would say like 2 to 3, 4 days in advance. And one of the things I do is like if I'm in this week, I'm going to look at my next week and see what I have to prep. And so we are a note taking software as well. Like we have a note taking aspect. So that's where I take my notes. And essentially I just start my note for that meeting from the invite. And I look at, okay, what did we talk about? We have the whole notes history in our platform. So what did I talk about last time? What do we need to talk about this time? What do I need to prep? So, I may be looking at, okay, I need to look at the adoption usage. I need to look at, who's on this call. What research do I need to do on them? Can I look at them on LinkedIn? Do I need to look at product update things? Do I need to go connect with product on timelines? And let's look at intercom. What were some previous tickets they may have had? So things like that. And I'm just like bulleting some things that I need to prep. And I'll set my time for like how much I need to prep. And then if I don't get my notes finished, this is something I've been doing recently that I think's been helping me not have to like rethink about where I started and ended. But like just mentioning like, okay, you need to prep for these few more things yet. Like if I don't get it in the first time that I prep, so that when I come back, I'm not like reiterating every single thing and kind of going through where I need to start again. So it kind of saves me some time, if that makes sense. And then, yeah, I have my notes there. I pull them up for the call and that guides me. And also one of the things I really focus on is question asking. So like I need 2 to 4 great questions to ask on that call that I know are important with whatever information I'm trying to get from them. But that's something I'm always focusing on too, like more questions, more curiosity. There's always something you can uncover on a call. I think that's a huge part of being a CSM. Always like be in discovery, always be asking questions that are just going to give you a deeper understanding, deeper the relationship.
Yeah, I love the call out on always be on discovery as a CSM on every call, all the time. Yeah, that definitely benefits us in the long run. Awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Julie.
Yep.
Moving on to the skills piece. I know you mentioned, on the communication side of things, on framing the emails, having clear action items and next steps. What else comes to mind when you think of the skills that directly results in your performance?
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the things that I pull from education a lot is always thinking about the customer, like, and the perspective of the customer. I think that's something I can continuously improve on as well as I continuously learn about um, our business and also what the customers care about and also all the different customers that I work with and what they care about, like their needs. Um, but that's something I had to do in education, right? Like if you teach kids, you have to think about, okay, how is this specific kid gonna grasp information? How are they gonna um, learn? And I think that concept applies to, who you're talking to on calls, what do they care about? Um, and like their and specific customers and the business needs and like what their business impact is related to the value that we're bringing. So that's something I'm always trying to keep in mind, and also like in product conversations that we have as a business too. Like, are we building something else out? Okay, like why are we building this out? What customer feedback has we had that has showed that we should build this? And just kind of like making sure our company's always thinking about the customer first with that kind of internal decision making as well. Um, I also think one of the things that I've been realizing that's so important is like multi-threading in the account, and doing that early on in the account. So, if I get a one key stakeholder early on, like making sure that I multi-thread and get some of the other key stakeholders in, and just understanding like who's my champion, who's the decision maker at the end for the contracts, the renewals, and I think I'm playing into some of the skills that I built like while I was on LinkedIn and networking. And so, yeah, I've been able to tie that into the multi-threading piece. And I also think there's a huge component here with CS you're almost kind of like an SDR sometimes where if you have to outreach to people, and you haven't met them before, like, your emails are completely different than when you're just doing a follow-up with a customer that you just met with, right? And it's like, what's your subject line? How are you going to engage them? And that's kind of where I collaborate with sales a little bit too, because I'm like, how would you approach this email? Like, how would you approach this outreach? That's like kind of their bread and butter. Also, we do that too, but I think that's something that I think is a really important skill for CS. Um, Another thing that I mentioned the curiosity piece, and I think that's like a really big characteristic of myself that's helped me a lot in CS. But I also think like I'm a reflector that can go like too much. Like I can reflect so much that it's like never ending. But I also think being able to reflect on yourself and how you're conducting calls and like watching your calls back, like that's going to help you just improve and like execute differently. Like if you're just continuously doing the same thing and never adjusting, um, you're not going to get better. So
Such good stuff there. Like I've seen quite a few like crossovers from like teachers coming into CSMs,
Mhm.
and your latest episode on CSNBS. I love the name, by the way, of the
That was a good
podcast.
name too, I gotta
Uh,
say.
like how you share about the experience, and no wonder you guys are so good at being a CSM. That like so much crossover that and skills that you can bring in as a CSM, the customer first mentality, the LinkedIn networking skills that you've built, which is great. You can probably create a course on that and sell, Julie. Just an idea there.
You also
But like,
asked me about that, and I need to like you made me think. Okay, like I used to talk about it a lot more on LinkedIn. Now I'm kind of all over the place, but I should. You asked me questions about that, and I should get you some more content on networking.
yeah,
So
I'll take the
apologies.
credit. Yeah, when that comes out. And the last one, like watching your calls back. I always like every time I do that is always like cringe for
Yep.
me every time I listen to my calls. But it definitely benefits me, and like even like asking my manager to
Yeah, same.
have a listen to a specific call, even that helps. Just improving on the call feature. But yeah,
I
those are
just
really great skills. Yeah,
I
sorry.
wanna I wanna say something about the asking manager for a call because I just got a really good tip from Christy Felteruso to ask a specific thing you're looking for the manager to give you feedback on. I've given my calls and I've said, give me feedback, but it's been very generic. Now I'm like gonna try to, hey, can you watch out for this? What can you give me feedback on that? And I think that's like less overwhelming for the manager. Like otherwise it's so generalized and like, they could be it's easier to have a focus point when you're going into watching the call. So I'm gonna try that now with my manager and um I think it just makes more sense. So just wanted to share that tip.
Yeah, oops, I'm the guilty one. Ask my manager, just give me a feedback on this call. Okay, I'll be more specific as well. But thanks for that, Julie. Uh, on the habits, so this always gets me excited. Whenever I ask my guests on like what habits do you guys like have on your day to day, whether that's drinking coffee or going for a walk, going for a jog in the middle of the day, or anything like how you approach calls and things like that. It doesn't have to be like customer focused in that sense, but even like you mentally being like restful and physically being restful, anything that gives you a break and how you manage your day to day. Like so curious to know like how does your like day to day look like? What are your habits that you built so far?
Yeah. I'm gonna share like my morning stuff and then I'll also share like my end of day stuff too. So
Perfect.
morning, I'm best when I like work out in the morning and do like a lifting session before the day. And that's when I feel like I'm my best. After that, I usually like to eat like a solid breakfast with some protein. So I feel just like full and like kind of fueled for the day. Because if I'm ever starting my day where I didn't eat like a really big breakfast or something, like I just know I'm just gonna not eat till like 12 and it's just gonna be horrible. So, and then also just making sure I'm pumping myself with a ton of water. And then I also try to do some sort of like reading, journaling, prayer before the day as well, because one thing that has been really different for me is not being like being on tech all day has been a big challenge for me. I would say from going from like being a teacher, I wasn't on like the computer much at all. And so it's just a lot of tech. Like that can be super draining for me. Like you said, introverted, like it is energy sucking for me to have meetings with customers. Like I like meeting with people, but that is something that like is energy sucking for me. So I have to be mindful of that and how I set my day up for success. Yeah, and then at the end of the day, I need to get better at this, but I think one thing that would be really good for me is like immediately after I'm done working, like having to go do something so I get away from work because obviously like I like to work. I like to be good at my job, and so it can definitely go into longer hours in the day. But like just going for a walk immediately after so that I'm like turning my mind off of work. Um, but I also I'm not super consistent with this, but one thing I do like to do is set up like, okay, here's the 4 action items that I need to do for the next day. And that kind of like removes oh my gosh, I have so much to do out of my head so that I'm like, okay, when I come to my desk next morning, it's like, okay, I got to start here, 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 and like do these things. Um, the worst way to start your day is to like go on Slack or like start with your email because that's like a black hole and you could be there for like an hour and then you're like, oh crap, I didn't do anything. And so I try not to do that. And I really need to get better at blocking like, okay, this is the time that I check my email in the day. This is the time that I check Slack. I know that's not always possible because maybe you have an escalation or something, but I think that we just really have to manage our time, especially over like meetings and things, and we have to do other work outside of meeting with customers. So those are some of the things that I do. And I try to get up and walk like during the day as well. At least get like a 45-minute walk somewhere. And if it can be in the middle of the day, that's ideal. Obviously, maybe not 45, but like 30 or some sort of movement during the day. So I'm away from my computer and up and moving. So
Yeah, I'm not surprised because I've been following you for on LinkedIn for a while now, and I'm not surprised that a lot of like physical activities like workouts and going out for walks and things like because you really enjoy doing all that. So that's great. And I can totally relate to the piece where you mentioned just going out for a walk at the end of a work day to kind of like segregate that, especially when you're working from home. It can kind of like you don't even there's no proper like okay, there's 9 to 5 and then
yep.
you go home, but then like working from home is kind of tricky when it comes to that. So that's a good call out, like just go out for a walk and
Yeah.
it's like kind of switch from work to kind of home mode.
Yeah.
Awesome.
What do you do? I'm
Awesome.
curious.
I so I have a 2 year old at home, so
That's
I just
different.
don't have yeah, I just don't have an option to work from home, you know? So I come to the office every single day, because I don't have like a private room or privacy to
Yep.
kind of work from there. So I come to the office every single day, but my wife and my son are away for a few weeks, visiting my in-laws. So I've been taking benefit of this time, like working from
Nice.
home, just by myself. Uh, but otherwise, yeah, my definitely start off. I've been recently starting off working out. Start my day
Nice.
working out. I've been gotten into like kettlebells
Oh
for the
yeah.
past 4 months now, so really into it. So that's been pretty like effective and beneficial, especially mentally. You know, it's just been like the stress relief and just like mentally, it's been pretty beneficial to me. Apart from the physical benefits, but
Yep.
yeah, those things have really helped. Of course, like I have the coffee to start off the day. That's always there. But otherwise, yeah, calendar. If it's not in the calendar, it doesn't happen. So yeah, I just like live and breathe in the calendar. So that's been helpful to kind of
Yeah, same. Same.
structure my life.
I have a question though. This is something that I've been working on with my workflow and things, and I think it's so important as a CSM to like set up systems and like be efficient with, your prep, your follow up, and also managing your tasks, like what action items you need to do. So like if you have a call and you have to follow up something immediately, okay, great. That you're gonna remember that and you're gonna most likely get it done unless you have something immediately after. But like tasks that can be completed in like maybe a week or two. Like how do you manage that? Where do you keep track of that? Just curious how you manage that. I think that's like such an important piece. And like you said, if it's not in my calendar and it's not in my line of sight, like I'm forgetting.
So I haven't set up like any complicated setup. So what I do is I use my calendar. So I'm using Google Calendar, and I
Yep.
have the notes, I have the tasks uh, where I take on all the tasks. So that only comes up because when I book my calls with
Hmm.
customer, it's always, you can't book back-to-back calls with me.
Yeah,
There's
yeah,
always a 15-minute
yeah.
a gap. So based on that, my calendar will still have time. So even after a call, I would still have time to kind of take notes. But if I don't, I would actually put it in my notes in my calendar. So everything is in the
Ah,
calendar view. So it's on the right tab, and I can see based on the time, based on the customer. I can put in the portal link directly and the date and all that. So I follow up there. So it's everything is in the calendar. So I
got it.
use that to kind of keep track of it. That makes sense, Julie.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think so. Cool.
Yeah, yeah.
Nice.
Nothing complicated. Pretty basic. Yeah,
That's
works for
good. Keep
me.
it simple. Keep it simple.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Uh, Okay, on the cross-functionality that we previously kind of touched on, you have three team members, but then you briefly mentioned on the sales on the email bit, like how the sales actually approach the BDRs actually approach the email and things like that. But as a CSM, I'm curious, like what are the best practices that you have developed when working with your sales counterpart? And also before that, like how is the setup? I would imagine the 50 customers have different sales rep aligned with the customers. So like first, like how's that set up? And then secondly, like what best practices have you developed on working with the sales?
Yeah, for sure. I don't think I struggle here really because I'm just kind of curious all the time and like it comes off as like genuine curiosity. So I don't struggle to build relationships too much with the sales team. We are also our smaller company, so it's easier to like I would say build relationships that way. But I also think like if you're a newer CSM and just starting in at a company, which I just was unaware. I would have like made an intentional move to like connect with the sales team earlier on, because it's so important. Like you're getting handovers from them. Also, you want to know how they're speaking about your product. You want to know what kind of pains they're constantly seeing, objections, what competitors are getting brought up in conversations. You just can learn so much from the sales calls. And you also should know about how the buyer journey works, and what they are going through before they come to you. Um, so that would be my advice for anyone starting out new. Um, and then, yeah, and I would just ask to like hop on some calls too or watch calls. Um, but then I think when you're like just asking questions to them and you're genuinely curious, like you're building that relationship, right? Like they want someone who cares about what they're doing. That's naturally going to build a relationship, right? Our handoff works as they would fill out like a dually note template. We have like a handoffer template that we've created with information that we want for our kickoffs, and they send that over. Depending on if it's like a larger account or more complex, like we may have like a meeting together to discuss it. But I feel like since we're such a small team, like it's so easy. I'm constantly in contact with the AE that I work with. So, um, but I
So
think
is that one AE or do you have multiple AEs that you?
we have two AEs now. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
got it,
yeah.
got it.
Mhm.
Okay, that's interesting.
What
And
about you?
well, I have multiple AEs. It really depends on the specific segment that the sales rep is looking after. So yeah, multiple AEs. And one tip I actually got recently, it was just last week, I believe, was the CSM, one of my team members. So what she will do is actually beginning of every week all the schedule customer calls. So whoever is the sales rep assigned to those customers, she will actually send a Slack saying that, hey, I'm actually getting on a call with this customer this week on Wednesday. Do you have anything you want to bring up or you want to talk about? Are you exploring any opportunities? And she has she has like built a really good relationship with the sales folks. She has, because she is like so proactively like including them into those calls, like
Oh,
curious to know
nice.
like if they are looking for any growth opportunities, because like sales rep have quotas, so
Yeah.
we they obviously need that support. So it was a very unique approach, where I was like, they will figure out by themselves, unless like if I have like a customer, like if I find an opportunity, then I will actually engage with a sales rep, and not like proactively like, hey, I'm getting on a call with the customer. Do you have, you want to get on a call, or you want to, you do you have something in mind that they would benefit from, and things like that. So just bringing in the conversation and including them has been pretty effective for us. So I was like, hey, that's really cool. Let me give that a try. So let's see. Like hopefully next week I'll probably try that out and see how that goes. But that was
Do
an
they
interesting one.
join? Do they join kickoff calls?
Kickoff, yes, they
Okay.
would.
Okay.
And that's with the onboarding specialist. So they will
Oh, okay.
do the kickoff call. And then after the onboarding specialist, 90-day onboarding is what we do here in HubSpot. And then I will get on a call with the onboarding specialist and the customer to do a handoff. Uh,
Got it.
and,
Cool.
and, and
Interesting.
then after that, yeah, after that, it'll be me.
Nice.
Uh,
Very cool.
yeah,
Cool.
awesome. Hey, thanks for sharing that, Julie. It's always like tricky to work with sales, like because they have their own metrics, and we have our own metrics, and how to just
Yeah.
align and work together to for one goal. But then I think the customer first mentality that you mentioned, I think that plays a big part here. You bringing in that mentality, and even like sales rep bringing in that, kind of helps align and work together. But yeah, as everything works well, but sometimes it just doesn't. Like we
Yeah.
fail, and as CSMs, we often, like, sadly, we often do have that from time to time. So I was just wondering, like, what's a journey that you might be open to kind of sharing, where you kind of failed and what came out of it.
Yeah, I was thinking about this for a while, and I
Hmm.
don't know like any like major blow up situation. But one thing I will say about the word failure, like I'm trying to change my perspective about that word. So I feel like I'm have very high expectations for myself, right? So um and I want to make sure that I'm always improving, but I do think like every single situation that may not have gone the right way can be looked at as like a learning experience. So I would just say like learning experience, right? Not necessarily a failure, but I guess like if you lost an account, like, okay, we kind of failed, like we kind of failed. Um, but I would say, I think, since I manage so many accounts, I think things can get lost. I've had a few scenarios where, maybe someone didn't follow, I followed up a few times, maybe someone didn't respond, where then that lack of response in me or follow up or persistence could have impacted like the outcome of the account. So something to keep in mind for myself when just overall prioritization. Um, I also think I had an experience where it didn't necessarily go like completely bad, but it was a good eye-opening experience for me. Like in onboarding, there was main POC was trying to log in, having several issues like over and over and over. It's almost like this extension and browser, and I just like didn't think about like that it needed to be escalated, right? Like bring in the engineering team or pull in a meeting and get them on a call. And so it's not like the customer was super upset or like, wanting to back out of the contract or anything, but it was almost like that was a good learning experience for me because my manager kind of like, notified me. But I think those types of scenarios where knowing when to escalate based on when they're at like in the journey is important. And I think it's hard to gauge sometimes like through the internet, right? Like you don't always know when to escalate. I guess I don't know. It was probably just because I was newer and didn't know like when I should pull in engineering or when I should, escalate things. But I think that's a really important thing as well. Um, and then I think just knowing how to respond like we were talking about this before before we started, just like, an escalation situation that
Yeah.
we don't necessarily have a lot of control over, but being able to calmly respond to a customer and try to find them a solution always, or work around. That's something that I've learned too. But I don't know, I couldn't think of
It's like
like
an
anything.
underrated, very underrated skill. That one.
Yeah, and I think anyone who's going for education, they should be able to apply that easily, because I was talking about this on the other podcast I just went on, the CSMBS. Like, I used to have to de-escalate kids with behavior challenges. Like, they would be so upset that they would just be like, throwing chairs or whatnot. And it's like, I would have to de-escalate that. I'm like, someone's just kind of yelling at me through a chat. So I can definitely de-escalate this, as I can do
Yeah,
this, right? So,
that's like a
but
superpower that you have, Julie. Yeah.
what about you? I'm curious, like, in terms of like a failure or super learning experience.
Wow, failure. The recent one that I had was so like team lead. I recently became a team lead.
Oh,
Okay, it's
nice.
been a few months
Cool.
now, 5 months now. Uh,
That's
but
awesome.
thank you. So it's
Mhm.
been an interesting experience. So what I as a team lead need to do is like support my manager with maybe their like team meetings, enablement, new CSM, coaching and competency development or interviews and things like that. So I've been doing that. I think because it's new to me and because I feel there are also like senior CSMs in the team,
Mhm.
so I feel less of a CSM in that sense. Like, oh, do I even deserve to be a team lead for these like amazing senior CSMs? And how do I even approach this? Uh, so just like I didn't adapt it. So I was like using the same approach how I would use to the new CSM, the
Mhm.
same approach I was using it for the senior and principal CSMs, which wasn't obviously wasn't the way to go. But I was
Right,
just
right,
going with the flow and just using the same template. I think part of me was like just lazy, I guess, in all honesty. So yeah, I think that was the recent one that comes to mind, which was tricky. Uh, but yeah,
right.
lesson learned.
I think you just brought something up for me too, that I think I had a lot of learnings around, like, communication on Slack. Um, I'm kind of I have lots of thoughts, so like I can just spew
Mhm.
something out and not provide a lot of context. And so I learned a lot about, you know, set the stage for what you're talking about, give some context. Also, not everything needs to be shared in a public like channel. Not that anything was inappropriate,
Correct.
but just like, like if maybe it's a brainstorming session via face to face or whatever. So yeah, I learned a lot about Slack communication. That was very different for me. I didn't do that in education, obviously, and yeah, I just think the clearer you can be, the more concise you can be. How do you present the information? Like, it's just easier across the business. Like, you're saving everyone time from having to try to ask more questions on what you're talking about. So yeah, that I think that was one of my biggest learnings, and I definitely failed a few times.
Awesome. Yeah, this kind of reminds me like it kind of you can kind of sum this up as like reminds me of the quote. Sometimes you win and sometimes you learn. You know that quote.
Yeah,
So it's really the approach of not the perspective that you mentioned that it's not really a failure but just a learning experience. So having that perspective and just moving on and making sure you don't do that again
yeah,
is
yeah, yeah,
is
for sure.
definitely the sums it up. Awesome. Uh, we're almost at the end of it, Julie. Now as we wrap up our discussion, I always ask this from my guests because I want to keep the pod and ball
Yeah,
rolling. Uh, which CSM do you think you would want to listen on the spot?
yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't know if you know who this is, but Rishav, he works at Sales Loft. I connected with him a little bit on LinkedIn. I haven't chatted with him in a bit, but
Hmm,
he had some really great content out there for a while. I think he has a newsletter. Um, yeah, I'd like to hear his perspective on things and what he says.
oh,
Yeah,
cool. I will definitely reach out to him. Yeah,
yeah, he's a CSM
I'm
at
not
Sales
sure if
Loft.
I'm.
So
Oh, nice.
yeah,
Sales Loft. All right, I'll definitely reach out to him. Thanks for
Yeah.
sharing, Julie.
Oh,
And yeah, it's been so good to have you on. If I was a customer, like you make it so easy to have a conversation. You know
oh,
what I
thanks.
mean? Which
Oh,
is again like a very underrated, I don't even feel like this is like a pod recording, but rather just we're just having a good old like normal chat, just catching up,
well,
which
you're
is
so
which
you're
is
so easy to chat with too. Like that's two people, Like this is a
yeah.
two-person thing here. So, yeah, you're just like, I guess I would just say like chill, like, yeah, calming like effect, like I said in the beginning.
Awesome, awesome. But before we wrap up the pod, is there anything else you would like to share with our listeners? Perhaps any upcoming projects that you have? Of course, your LinkedIn is you always have great content there, but anything else, initiatives that they should be on the lookout for?
No, but I actually just made a link tree like right under my name so that like all the
Huh.
podcasts that I've been on are linked actually now. So if anyone wants to listen or like, learn about my journey, they can do that there. Because like sometimes I'll get people asking about how to transition or whatnot, and then I can have them like, go towards that a little bit too. So yeah, and then I have LinkedIn right now. I don't have anything else, and um maybe I'll make a networking course for you, Prep.
Yes, yes. Okay. I'll be looking forward to that. Awesome. You heard it first here, but I'll make sure to have that link tree linked in the show notes. But then I really want to express my heartfelt gratitude, Julie, for joining us today and sharing your insights. It has been an absolute pleasure having you on the show.
Yes, thank you so much. This is awesome. One of the best conversations
And
I've had.
appreciate it, Julie. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in to another episode of It All Depends Pod. We hope you enjoyed today's discussion. I'm sure you did. Don't forget to subscribe and be sure to join next time. Have a good one. Take care. Cheers. Bye, Julie.
Bye.